Good afternoon and morning for some of you. My name is Kyle Myers, and I'll be your moderator for today. When I'm not moderating webinars, I serve as the Chief Product Officer here at IntelAgree. In that role, I want to ensure we are delivering the best product and experience to our customers, old and new, as well as ensuring we continue to evolve the offering to suit the needs of all customers and future customers for years to come. I'm also joined by a wonderful guest speaker and a few of my colleagues who will introduce along the way. So today we're going to talk about the CLM adoption gap, some of the hidden costs of workarounds, AI and product capabilities available to you today, and then we'll open it up to some Q&A at the end. Before we get into the substance, I want to take a moment to introduce our keynote guest because her perspective is central to everything we're going to discuss today. Lucy Bassli is the founder and CEO of InnowLaw Group, and she's one of the clearest, most honest voices in legal operations today. Before starting InnowLaw, Lucy spent years as a senior attorney at Microsoft, where she oversaw contracting operations at a scale most of us never encounter. We're talking hundreds of thousands of contracts a year. She's seen what works, what doesn't, and more importantly, what it looks like when it's working but quietly failing. She's also a prolific author. Her most recent book, Contracting Simplified, came out in 2025. Before that, CLM Simplified in 2021, and The Simple Guide to Legal Innovation through the ABA. If you haven't read her work, I'd start there after today's call. She's been recognized as a top 50 AI thought leader by Thinkers 360, an ACC value champion, and one of the National Law Journal's outstanding women lawyers. But what I respect most about Lucy and why we wanted her here today is that she calls it like she sees it. She's not going to tell you what you want to hear. She's going to tell you exactly what you need to hear. So Lucy, thank you for being with us today. And to get us started, what are you seeing in the market landscape? And from your perspective, why are so many organizations struggling to extract full value from CLM?
It happens to be my absolute favorite question. Why, Kyle, I'll be happy to jump right in on this. Thanks so much for having me, for that really warm introduction. This is a favorite topic for me, and it has been before it was a cool topic in legal tech in general. So, contracting is such a pain point for most legal departments. Interestingly, regardless of what tech evolves and what pops onto the markets, contracting is and always has been around. It is and always has been a pain point. It is also one of the common areas of legal work across all law departments, regardless of shape, size, and industry and geography. So there's kind of a commonality and a comfort with contracting pain points that at least those of us who have been in it and those who are joining us today, hopefully will find that they are not alone, that they are sharing in some common pain points. And our job really here is to help demystify some things and help shed some light, hopefully, on why is it that it isn't getting better. And that's what it feels like. It feels like those who are struggling with contracting can't seem to kind of get it over the hump, even when they bring in technology, fantastic and good tech, but there still continues to be pain points and struggles. So what am I seeing? I would say at a macro level, we'll start there. What I'm seeing is a hunger and a thirst for automation, for sure. Unlike anything we've seen before, really in legal tech, we had some great evolutions that occurred in the e-discovery space. Once we added the E, from a technical perspective, again, discovery has been around for a long time, but with that kind of explosion of e-discovery, that was our first big, I think, insight into the kind of change its potential for legal professionals. And then thanks to COVID, and at the same time, the move to the cloud, that really put even more into the forefront the potential that tech can bring for improvements and efficiencies. And contracting seems to have been the top pain point and the focus for these new technologies. And then enter, of course, AI. A couple of years ago, I was wondering how long we'd go before one of us used the 2-letter word, and it was me. I did it a few minutes in, couldn't hold back any longer. It is just such a game changer. It is such a transformative type of technology that now is completely democratized and available to everyone. And the first place that we're seeing it play a really big role is in contracting. So not only has the need for tech and the thirst for tech grown and evolved really post-COVID, just in a very kind of necessary way. It was a forced need that suddenly lawyers felt that, we couldn't save things on our C drive anymore and walk down the hall when it comes to doing contracts. We really needed to use technology. Then AI really just made it accessible to everybody, not just legal professionals, but it made technology and contract automation now accessible to the business, to everybody across the enterprise, which is fueling the fire and the need for the legal teams to stay ahead of that, contracting automation curve that we're all on. CLM is in and of itself become its own little three-letter word in some ways, because contract lifecycle management is a complicated combination of processes and people and technologies across, enterprise. But CLM tech really is an end-to-end view into how contracting can be done better with automation. And that end-to-end vision, it's a lofty goal, I will say, because we're trying to automate complicated processes and multi-department users and integrations with complex enterprise systems. So with the explosion of CLM that happened around COVID and all the investments that happened in that tech space, and now with AI coming into it and kind of shaking things up a little bit for the more traditional view of contract lifecycle management, AI is really kind of poking the bear, so to speak, on that. I think we're seeing a bit of a frenzy of what to do fast, what to do better, and most importantly, how to optimize what people already have and they've invested time and money in. So what we're seeing at that macro levels right now, some angst, a lot of FOMO, and we still continue to see that underutilization with the technology that they do have in hand. I love these numbers. I think you've done such a great job at really trying to extrapolate what is going on out there. And that 50% mark, that's I would actually even say maybe on the lower end from what I'm seeing, sadly. I'm kind of happy to see 50% because for me, the general sense has just been a dissatisfaction in the market. And I will say, first and foremost, it's not because I'm a friend of IntelAgree or you've invited me to join this program. I will say it's often not the issue with the technology. We still have a gap in really that user knowledge and capability of how to optimize the technology that they do have. So that 50%, that failed to meet expectations, well, are the expectations reasonable? That's the first question I would have with this kind of a data point. What were the expectations of the users when they implemented the technology that now they're perceiving a failure? So I like to use the word perceiving, and not because I'm a lawyer and I like words like allegedly, but I do feel like this is a place where it's important to hold up a mirror to the users and to the humans that are interacting with the tech that we are so quick to blame, and it feels like such an easy place to place blame. But I think there's a little bit of a deeper challenge here, and I think it's on the people side. Let me pause there because again, I could keep going forever. There's a lot of other interesting numbers, Kyle. Shall we dig into some of these other points?
Yeah, well, no, I think that's great, and I think you hit on a little bit of a good point here around expectations and transformation in general. And so maybe from your perspective, what are some of the most common misconceptions folks have when they're getting into CLM about what a mature CLM program should deliver to their organization?
First of all, thank you for using the word program. I did not ask you to do that, but that is my favorite word because we forget that, again, contracting lifecycle management, we do little c, little l, and little m. It is a program. It needs to be treated as a program. It is many, many little projects. And as I mentioned before, stakeholders and timelines and deadlines and artifacts and materials and systems that all need to work together. And we have to approach it programmatically. I think that is the number one misconception, is that once you bring in a CLM system, I'm going to make sure that we're always going to add the word system behind CLM. Once we bring in that technology, there is a misconception that it will fix the problems. Now that we have technology, now that we have a robust CLM system, contracting should be better. Why isn't it? Why doesn't it feel better? That's the number one misconception. That technology is being perceived as a silver bullet, and there is a gross underestimation of the amount of effort that it takes, or the depth of the effort that it takes from the users to actually be ready for that kind of technology, to get ready, have all their ducks in a row, and then once it's live, immediately work with it to make sure that it's doing what's expected. And that requires hands-on involved users. This is not none of the CLM technologies are a plug and play system. If you're really looking for end-to-end intake, workflow, routing, review, contract creation, signature, and then, of course, repository and extraction of data points. And that's a full complex life cycle. And somehow people are either being sold on or misunderstanding during their selection process what the tools can do for them without that pre-work. The tools can do it, by the way. I'm a big fan. The tools do the things that they show in their demos, but the way they do those things on a set of demo documents and demo processes or hypothetical processes is going to be very different than how that all works in a real life situation where business is moving fast, people are frustrated, nobody's taking the time to learn the technology, and they haven't done the prep work. They don't have their templates. They don't understand their internal processes well enough to automate them. They don't understand their own approval routing and approval requirements. They don't have fallbacks. They don't have playbooks, right? Their templates aren't clean and updated. I mean, there's a lot that goes into being ready to really embrace and optimize a full CLM technology. So I think the number one misconception is really that it's a project. It's not a program. We'll get a tool. We're done. Yay, it's here. Now tech should be, solving a lot of the problems. That's the biggest challenge we're seeing. It's a misalignment.
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on and good to hear. Where would you say you're seeing maybe adoption and change management usually break down? Is it people? Is it process? Is it technology? Is it sort of the confluence of those three things?
Yes, and yes. You again, change management. I love that you're using all my favorite words. Change management is completely often just disregarded. It's an oversight. Does not get the attention needed for these kind of systems to be able to function at their best and highest use. The energy that's needed to manage the change that a CLM system can bring into an enterprise that doesn't have any contracting automation. It's not a small lift, to be clear. It's not, and I don't mean small in terms of, oh my God, you need to spend a full-time person's job for months and months managing the change. I don't mean small in terms of time or resource. I mean in just attention and effort. That change is hard. And there's a breakdown, usually, I'm going to say first with the people. There's been a misunderstanding of what the tech can do. There's been a mis-selling even internally of what the tech can do. There's unclean ownership amongst people. The decision makers aren't clear. The stakeholders that should have been in the room when the tech was brought in to begin with maybe weren't even in the room. And so the ability to manage change has to start, the change management starts at the beginning. It starts before you even select a system. And yet we're just seeing very little attention on change management. And change management in and of itself, without sounding, making it fluffy or squishy or consultancy, I mean, you are managing a change in how people work. If you're the one that's driving this new program or this implementation, and that requires every possible way of breaking through to people so that they understand what's coming, what's different, and how it's going to impact their day jobs. Impacting people's day jobs is a risky proposition. And I think we underestimate what people feel and sense when a new piece of technology like this comes in and what that means for them. Are they going to be able to keep up? What's it going to do to their day job? Is it going to, by any chance, automate them? And obviously, we're hearing that topic loud and clear right now with AI. So change management often doesn't get the attention it needs. And change management doesn't have to be complicated. It is repeat, ongoing, recurring communication via video, via audio, in-person workshops, training, documentation. I mean, it's everything and anything that can work for your employees. And that's a broad set of, opportunity there to educate. That change management is it's one of my favorite overlooked aspects of good contracting, programmatic hygiene.
Yes, and often somewhat of an afterthought, unfortunately. But maybe just to circle back to the buzzword used earlier, AI.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing? There's a lot of hype out there, and not just in CLM for sure. But where are you seeing AI add real value in contracting today, and where is the hype still maybe ahead of reality in your opinion?
Sure. And I'd love to share. I don't know if I have a quick here, but we can certainly follow up with the attendees. We do an annual market study of the CLM space, the whole market landscape. And a couple of years ago, when we started it, we would have a little matrix in the back of the study with a list of the CLM technology providers and where we see them playing in the contracting life cycle. It's not an assessment, it's not a rating. We don't do that, but we really just wanted to give a view of the landscape and who's more in the repository storage space, who's in workflow, kind of different ways to see the different strengths of the product. By the time the second year came around that we were doing it, we had gone to, I think, 200 providers on the list. And by last year, we just stopped putting a list together because the number was so completely overwhelming because AI has brought to it a completely new crop of technologies that are playing in the CLM lifecycle. Doesn't mean that they're a full end-to-end CLM system, but they are playing in particular areas of the life cycle. And the one thing we did with this market study is really try to understand exactly that question that you raised. Where is AI actually delivering real value rather than just slapping it on and saying, yep, we've got that too now. We can all check the box. The short answer that we're seeing is in a couple of areas. And, we like to think about the contracting life cycle as a way to ground everybody to one way of understanding contracting. The life cycle where a contract is born, how it travels, how it's negotiated, and then where, of course, it's stored and then managed after signature. We see the biggest benefits right now in AI is in that storage part, first and foremost. The ability to be able to run smart, fast search and extract data now has gone leaps and bounds to what it was 3-4 years ago, thanks to AI. So I think that is a top use case that we're seeing AI is doing really good, smart things and being able to extract data in a much more accurate and really much more intelligent way than before, where it was just kind of this rough, brute word search feeling, and the results weren't fantastic. The other areas on the other end of the life cycle, of the contracting life cycle, and that is in that contract review and negotiation, for sure. That is a very deep area of legal work. That is where attorneys actually should be spending most of their time, is in review of the contract, the actual editing, and the negotiation. And that is the place where AI right now can be extremely valuable and helpful and useful. I'm going to say as a very, very smart first pass, as a very smart assistant to the legal professional. We're seeing some really great things. We're also seeing a whole bunch of hype and overselling and really unfounded fears that it's going to take away lawyers' jobs, today. There will be an impact, and I'm happy to put in my 2 cents like everybody else on where they think it's going to go, although none of us really quite know yet. But those are the 2 areas I would say, kind of that post-signature data extraction, and then in that review and negotiation where you're able to use AI as a very smart, very eager helper that's there to highlight the big issues and really draw the eyes of the attorney to the areas they should focus on inside of a contract. That speeds things up a lot for us when we're trying to get through a couple of dozen pages of words on a paper.
Yeah, and love the touching on the negotiations there. I think at least in our interactions, we have come to find that the legal profession in general tends to be on the more risk averse side of the landscape. And so maybe just if you could touch on quickly, sort of what is the perception of trust in negotiations as it relates to AI outputs? I think it sounds great that we got this version in and we got this version out because we had a rule set and that's what we got. But sort of where are we right now in terms of lawyers trusting outputs and sort of that augmented negotiation?
Sure. I think right now we're in a healthy skepticism phase, I would say, if I had my own adoption curve. taxonomy, I would say there's a healthy skepticism, healthy because people are embracing it, right? Lawyers are embracing the fact that AI is here to stay, that it is not something they can avoid or hope it, will wash over and kind of they can just keep doing things the way they always have, quietly, which I think has been the mode of operation with a lot of the other tech advancements from legal. Has been like, oh, that's good. Good that that's happening. I'm going to just keep doing what I've always done. That is changed for sure. And there is this healthy curiosity. There's a healthy interest. The FOMO is not healthy, but it is driving, I think, some behaviors of, I better learn. I better catch up. I better figure this out. The actual results and the outputs aren't yet reliable. I'm going to just kind of say it that way. They are with a blind eye. They aren't reliable as a replacement to the attorney's eyes yet, right? It just isn't there yet. It's getting there. It's getting smarter. And the attorneys who are taking the time to work with the output and use it to educate the system and work with the system and treat that AI capability and technology as truly a new addition to the team that needs training, they're doing much better than those who get that first output and are like, well, no, I knew it couldn't. I see it didn't catch that thing. I knew it wasn't ready. I'm going to go back to doing things, my way, and I'll try it again in a little while. So somewhere between those two personas is that healthy skepticism of, you know what? I need to figure this out. It's going to take a little time. I have to embrace the fact that this will take time, just like any new resource that comes onto a team. For some reason, we haven't haven't bridged that gap yet of treating the AI technology as a new resource or a virtual team member. I mean, I hate to say it, but I always say it's like you got a new little robot friend on the team now, and like you would train a new hire or an intern or a recent law school grad, you need to have the same patience, but people don't. So that's the next evolution, I think, in embracing it.
Yeah, love that. Kind of working on the AI so that you can work with the AI. Well, thanks so much, Lucy. We're going to let you out of the hot seat for a few minutes here, but super helpful. So now, James, and for those of you who don't know him, James Parks is our chief data scientist. Next question coming over to you. What are you seeing in terms of the rise of point solutions and agents, and maybe the confluence of those solutions with enterprise software?
Yeah, it's a big question, but I'll unpack it. But you can see from the slide, I've sort of set the table. But I want to start with sort of a hypothetical question. If we were all in a room together, I'd say show of hands. But just think in your head, how many people mow their own lawns? Probably enough time for you to think through it. So the reason I asked this question is most people at this stage don't mow their own lawns. They have a lawn service. Like, for example, I have a lawn service come and do it. But why? There's cheap availability of lawnmowers. Why do people mow their own lawns? And if you think about it, some of the reasons are you don't have to store and maintain a lawnmower. You don't have to change the oil in it. You don't have to have the expertise. Like, when do I put down the weed and feed? How do I get this weed eater to start? You don't have the cost. And more importantly, you get the time back. Like, that's just something that you don't have to do. And if I had to summarize all those things into just a couple words, I would say peace of mind. Peace of mind is the reason you don't do it. It's just done. You don't have to worry about it. And the reason I start like this, on the right-hand side of this slide, for SaaS, there's a lot of parallels there. So with a more traditional SaaS CLM, you get structured data and system of record. It's capturing the data that's important to you. Like Lucy said, there's been leaps and bounds improvements in augmenting more traditional rules-based system with AI to pull the things that are important to you. You get the SLAs and reliability commitments, the security and compliance and governance. This is a huge one. You'll see in a second when I talk about AI agents why this one is so important. Things are done the way that you want them to be done, and you can rely on them being done that way. You also get the engineering discipline and support. So this point is really if you're thinking about vibe coding a solution, if it breaks, what do you do? And the next point sort of touches on that as well, warranty and liability. When something goes wrong, then what? So with the rise of AI and more recently AI agents, like you can clearly see the value of having a SaaS system, help in your contracting process. But people are also saying, well, why can't I just use agents? And there are a lot of pros, and I've listed them here, or some of them here. So, rapid, flexible task execution, natural language interaction. Generally, there's like a level of flexibility and ease of use that's tantalizing. So I can get it to do lots of things on the fly, right when I need it, exactly the way I need it. And a good example of a use case for this is in redlining. Like we always hear in redlining contracts, every shop has their own way that they do redlining. Some companies, they just cycle through their fallbacks. Some companies want to exclusively use their clause library. Some do more, one-off negotiation. Some even within a company, you might have this contract that you really scrutinize, and you have this other contract that you're like, just generally kind of push it in our direction, or maybe there's like these two clauses just have to be ours, everything else is probably fine. So it runs a full spectrum of how people want redlining to work, and that's hard to do if you do strictly traditional SaaS without any AI in it at all, because you need the flexibility. And similar case could be made for ease of use, just like being able to do things easily. So there's definitely pros on the left-hand side too. The cons mainly are that it's a bit of the Wild West. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, how do you know that you're, if you let's say you went full on AI agent, you just use like Claude Cowork or maybe even a legal specific one, but it's just AI agent first, no SaaS backing. How do you know the approvals that you need to be fired were fired? How do you know that, your compliance, whatever your compliance guidance is, that it was followed? How do you know that like the right person approved and signed? And how do you know all that happened? And that's where it really falls down. And that's where why there's an IntelAgree logo in the middle of this Venn diagram, is because we realize that the value is not in picking one end of the spectrum or the other, but it's really understanding the technology and understanding the leverage points and where using, for example, AI agents for a specific workflow makes sense and where it doesn't. Where do I need I need it to be done this way every time, repeated over thousands of contracts, versus I got this kind of wording that I've never seen before, and I generally have these instructions for how I'm supposed to handle this, but I need to handle this like new situation, or I need to, do something new on the fly. And so weaving those together, I think, is where the real benefit to AI agents is. And as this relates to point solutions, obviously you could think of, if you have like, a couple examples would be just repository only point solution, or maybe you have just redlining only. Anything you can think of along that spectrum of all the traditional CLM workflows could probably live in any of these boxes. And I think where point solutions fall down is really in terms of how do you get the things to work together. So whether that's at my company, I have, this AI agent that I use for redlining, and then I have this SaaS thing that I do for repository only. How do you get them to talk to each other? Because there's real value in that happening. And that's whether you do it or whether maybe you buy a full CLM, but the CLM itself is built from either partnerships or acquisitions where they're just sort of cobbling it together in the background too. But I'm gonna talk more in a second about that.
No, that's great, James. And I think for the audience at large, maybe it would be helpful to give some concrete examples of why the architecture of a system does matter and how AI compounds its value within a well-architected solution.
Yeah. So just building on what I was just saying, at IntelAgree, our entire AI offering, like all the places where we've thoughtfully, decided this is a place where we can use AI, is built from the ground up, meaning it's not like we acquired some third party or we have some partnership or something. So it's built natively in IntelAgree. And why does that matter? So aside from the things I just said, where it's sort of cobbled together on the back end, there's real synergy in shared data amongst these features. So for example, and it's like two-sided. If I release an update that improves the feature that extracts information out of the contract, like it finds the clauses that matter to you and maybe categorizes them or whatever it is that you want to do with it. If I improve that ability, I also, because these things are naturally, natively connected together, I also improve its ability to redline that in the future and for it to score the risk in that in the future. So there's synergy between them. And there's also the second point under why native, having the full context. So like if you have your solution for repository only and you have your solution for redlining, and these two don't get the benefit of the shared context, then when you're redlining a contract, you may not know that you've negotiated with this party, 6 times in the past, and here are the things they push back on, and here are the things that they require. And so you're sort of reinventing the wheel every time. So there's a whole lot of value just having the full context. And the last one is really more about the experience. And what I mean by no switching is it being a smooth interface, a natural feeling at the point where you need some feature or where you want some feature, it's there and it's available to you, rather than having to, switch between windows or copying and paste in between them, or, I see that I need to do this. I'm going to go over here and do this other thing on the side, and then I'll come back and I'll do this. It's just one natural interface. And beyond it being native to the CLM, and this is something that Lucy, you touched on, we make it easy to get started fast because we realize that there's a gulf of opportunity between the technology that's available today and how it's being utilized. And it's not always so obvious how to get, an AI tool to do the thing that you want it to do. And so we try to bridge that gap with in-app workflows. For example, we'll see a little later, but for redlining, you can pick where you want to start. You can start from I don't want to configure anything. I just have this like checklist on my desktop or playbook, and I just want to upload that and get suggestions based on that. We can do that. If you want to say, here is my polished enterprise playbook, and I want to basically sort of import that logic into IntelAgree, we can infer an IntelAgree playbook from that, or you could write it yourself. All levels are just fine. And we also have automatic feedback loops. So there's some features we'll learn just from the normal course of like seeing what you do. Like you tag, this particular part of the limitation of liability and call it this particular attribute. And you do that enough times and the system's like, oh, I understand what you're doing. I understand why this is important. And the last one is purposeful iteration. So, once you do something, for example, with AI, how do you make that thing better? Aside from like the automatic feedback loops. And we also make it possible for you to either, provide examples or even literally there are several features have a test capability where in the app you can say, I just configured this. I want to test it on a couple contracts. It'll run, it'll show you the result. And you can just say, no, I wanted this in Canadian dollars, or no, actually this red line was too heavy handed, or you could tell it whatever feedback you want for it to update. And really what we care about, why we're all here is we want the results. Like what is, if I have an AI native CLM and I use these tools to bridge that gulf of adoption, what's the result? The result is smarter negotiations. Like you have the full context of how you negotiated in the past with this counterparty, what concessions were given, what did we get in this other place of the contract, just the full, like all the information available that you as the attorney have, but traditionally the AI doesn't have, because like, for example, it's a siloed solution where it has only the information of the current contract and the playbook that you're given, and not this like wealth of information that's also available if it spanned the entire CLM lifecycle. And the same goes for portfolio insights, like not just, cataloging like which contracts have a limitation liability clause, but like which ones were not my standard limitation liability, which ones don't have an exact dollar amount that caps the limit, like really fine-grained things that you can know about your contracts, and ultimately leads to stronger risk positions, which is really what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to limit the risk to our organization.
Yeah, that's super helpful, James. Really appreciate that. So now we're going to call on our Director of Product Management, Michael Schachter, and our Director of Solutions Consulting, Maria Swarhowski, to provide some tangible examples of these practices. And the good news for y'all is no more slides. We'll show some tech now.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle. And, what we're hearing right now is a lot of momentum, obviously, around AI. And like Lucy mentioned, it's really in areas like data extraction, negotiations, and risk scoring. So like on the data extraction side, teams are really seeing gains in speed and efficiencies. Clients are able to get key terms, get insights out of the contracts much faster than before. And kind of what's really changed is how easy it is to get started now. In the past, with machine learning, you usually have to go train, over 20 examples before you can get those results. But now with Sage Assist and with prompting, users can get key data, those attributes, with just a single prompt. So that's just making data extraction far more friendly and much easier and faster to deploy across the teams. What we've seen from the negotiation standpoint with Sage Assist is helping teams move faster and more consistently, really with assisting on quicker drafting, better alignments to your standards, and helping those organizations scale their best practices across every deal. And with risk scoring, I love risk scoring, but from a customer standpoint, we're really seeing the ability to quickly understand their contract portfolio and prioritize where to focus. Customers are getting a lot of value, and we're seeing it where they're able to compare different versions of a contract and clearly see how risk changes over time, especially after the legal team stepped in to that red line and mitigated those risks. So one trend that's really accelerated is how comfortable and more comfortable clients are getting with prompting. Early on, it was definitely a learning curve, but now we're seeing our users adopt much easier with their day-to-day work, and it's really transitioning directly into the platform with stronger outcomes. So we've talked about data extraction, we've talked about negotiations and risk scoring. Working with Maria right now, we're going to show it inside the platform, starting with the data extraction of seeing how easy it is to set up. So I'll hand it to you, Maria, if you want to take over.
And real quick, Maria, while you're getting started, just a quick call out to the audience. During this demonstration, if there's any questions that have come up either during the conversation so far or during these demos, please feel free to use the Q&A function in the meeting here, and we have some time at the end reserved for those. So, thanks, Maria.
Thanks so much, Kyle. It's so nice to see everyone today. I actually spotted a few of my favorite customers coming in earlier. So hello to those of you that I have met, and hello to those that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. It's always nice to see old faces and catch up with new people as well. So I'm really excited because this is the part where I get to jump in and actually bring some of the talking points that we've covered today to life. So to start, I thought we would focus on really what matters to you in your contracts, how we can help you identify those key elements, and really also understand why they matter, what's risky, and then how to act on them. So that's kind of what we're going to tackle first. So when it comes to attributes, give me a second, I'll have it over here. So when it comes to attributes, those are really, for those that might not be familiar, those are the key data points we've referenced throughout this conversation. Key data points, important information that you want to pull from the contracts. And what we've heard from our customers pretty consistently is two things. First, one size doesn't fit all. Like, contracts are complex. There's a lot of nuance. They're rarely just out of the box. And that makes a big difference. The second is that what's important today might not have been important yesterday. So a pandemic hits and suddenly everyone cares about force majeure or a new administration. Okay, so what I think where we were is kind of that second thing, that what's important today, might not have been important yesterday. Force majeure hits. Suddenly we need to find out what that language is in our contracts, where a new administration comes in, and suddenly tariffs matter. Like, the priorities are shifting constantly, and that's the reality. business changes daily, or if yours is anything like mine, maybe hourly. And customers don't have time to retrain the models every time priorities change. So I'm going to put on my admin hat here for a second. This is something business users typically wouldn't see, but I thought it was important to really go behind the scenes here and just show how flexible this really is. So what you're seeing here is an attribute that we're creating, payment terms, right? If I want to track something like payment terms, I can simply go in here and just key in, right? How many days does a party have to pay for services or products, right? I can simply say that to the system, define it in natural language. And if I need to, directly from this screen as well, I can also test my newly created attribute, right? I could say, okay, the customer agrees to pay all fees. This is the language I'm pulling out of my contract. I pop it in here and it's going to actually test and show me, yep, we're pulling 15 days, which is what was in the payment terms here out of the contract. So if I needed to, I could go in and refine it, but boom, like this is ready to go immediately. That's how easy it is to set up an attribute, no model training required. So I thought it was important for you to see this because if we go back to that force majeure example, for instance, like if we suddenly need to understand the force majeure language in our contracts, it's important that we understand that language in new contracts coming in, but it's also important that, we can answer that question that you might have in your head as you're thinking about that example, which is like, where does this exist in the contracts I already have? And how fast can I then go and find out where that is and what it is, right? So it's important to know that I can apply this attribute, not just moving forward, but then retroactively across the entire contract repository as well. All right, so I'm going to take my admin hat off here and just switch to a contract. Now I'm a contract reviewer, right? And feel free, Michael, if you have anything to add, just stop me, jump in. Once I get going, it's hard.
Absolutely. So. I'm tracking time, so I'll keep you moving.
Okay, perfect. So for time purposes, I've already brought in a third-party contract ahead of time. I've opened the contract record. Most of you are probably familiar, but the contract record's kind of the one place to go for everything for this specific contract. So let's go ahead and take a look at these attributes in action here. So I'll scroll down here. I've got my attributes here on the left-hand side of the screen. So what we've done is we've pulled out what's important to you here. We've organized it in a way that's meaningful. We flagged anything that's risky. So you can see right away if I'm, in finance and I click on the finance tab here, I can see all the information that's important to me in finance, that payment term attribute that we created available to me right here. We've also identified anything that's risky by throwing up these red flags, for instance, that you see on the payment term. And that could be something maybe that deviates from your preferred language. So if I, head over to legal, for instance, this is everything that's important to legal. And I can see, hey, the governing law state is California. We prefer Florida. So that's something I'm going to need to fix. So I can see whether that language in the contract, meets a certain standard, or I can also, if I go down to risk, for instance, I can also see whether the language in the contract requires additional review, for instance, by additional team or group. And then this can automatically route to them. The idea is, we're not just pulling out the data points that's important to you, we're providing to you those data points with context that matters to your specific business. But maybe as a legal or finance user, I don't just want to know what's unfavorable on the individual attribute level. That's great, but maybe I want a more holistic view. How do these terms contribute to the overall risk profile, for instance? This is what Michael was talking about with the risk score, right? So it's giving me a consolidated view of risk across this specific contract. And it's based on those attributes and those deviations that we identified, right? It's essentially taking those attributes and rolling them up to a calculated color-coded risk score. And that's kind of what you're seeing on the screen. I can dig into the overall risk score of the contract, or down here, I can see the individual risk scores for those attributes that are contributing to that overall risk score in the contract as well. And I
So what's
think,
nice here is you've got
Yeah,
that
go
ability
ahead.
on the left side to be able to, evaluate each of the contracts from an overall attribute standpoint. Like at the bottom, we've got a formula to have those attributes actually roll up to get the contract and overall score. And then kind of to wrap it up on the risk scoring side, we're able to see with our search and our analytics, how that rolls up to a contract type level.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the important things to understand too is that, like, based on this risk score, like maybe this is great, but I also want to be able to use this to report. I know Lucy mentioned smart search and how impactful it is. So I'll quickly show you an example of that. I'll open up a search here, and you can see that this is showing me across a group of expiring contracts, that overall risk score. So I could see the contracts here when they're expiring, and I've got that risk score here as well. So it can roll up to these overall risk score reports, whether that's, overall risk score or risk score for individual items, like here's the payment term risk score. Again, and the way this impacts the business, maybe now I'm looking at this report and I know which contracts I want to tackle first, right? Maybe it's the ones that have the highest risk score. So we've seen kind of how we can identify what's important and flag risk for the team. Now that I have that information, I understand what's in my contract, and I can move into negotiation with a clear understanding of the risks and kind of what I need to change. So I'm going to pivot over and cross my fingers while I'm doing it that you all can still see my screen, to Microsoft Word, since this is where we do most of our negotiating anyway, right? I've got my contract here on the left, my IntelAgree add-in here on the right-hand side, and I can scroll down and immediately see my suggested red lines. So they're automatically generated for me based on my preferred language, my rules. So I know, for instance, payment term was contributing to my risk score. So I can select payment term. It takes me right to the place in the agreement where that exists. And now I can view, hey, what are you suggesting? What is this red line suggestion? And why are you suggesting it? So I can see the suggestion. Again, I can see, an analysis of why it's being suggested. And then if it looks good, with one click, I can have it surgically make those red lines for me. And I'll turn on check changes for the other ones. But yep, I can have it surgically make those changes for me. Same with, I know governing law was one, right? So it takes me to the place of the agreement. I can view the analysis if I want to, or I can just click and it's going to surgically make those changes in the contract for me. And as I go through, I remember term was something that was affecting our risk score as well. So maybe that's one I want to do. And that's it. Like, that's how easy it is to redline your contract. And many of you might be thinking, hey, like, great, Maria, that seems easy, but what if I don't have a playbook? You are not alone. First of all, we run into a lot of customers that do not have a playbook. Never fear, Sage can help you in a lot of different ways with that as well. So if I go back to redline here, you can see I've got the option to upload and redline. So I can upload like maybe my gold standard contract and have Sage take a stab at creating the playbook rules and all of that kind of on the fly for us as well. Or maybe I'm just looking, I've got indemnification up here as an example. I'm looking at indemnification and I'm like, okay, I don't have a playbook, but I know what change I want to make. I can select Sage Assist here and I can provide a prompt, and Sage is going to assist with making those edits in the contract. So it's going to load that highlighted language that I selected, and we'll be able to give it a prompt and it'll help us make those edits. So maybe
what's really nice here, you can see it's already doing the analysis at the bottom to make sure it understands the highlighted text before making it. But kind of just to bring this all together from a time standpoint is we're able to extract those key attributes, identify the risk really at that V1 of the contract, do our negotiations, use our playbook to get our against our standards. And then when we bring the contract back in, we're able to see how that risk score has changed. You can see it moved down to an 8 there. And using, as the in-house legal team, you're able to see how you've mitigated that risk. So that's kind of putting the bow around it. And I think from that standpoint, Kyle, we can hand it back to you so we have enough time for Q&A.
Yeah, thanks so much, Michael and Maria. Sort of a common question here in the Q&A area. And Justin and Jack, we'll make sure that our L&O team reach out to you directly to make sure you're in a good spot. But maybe to James, as it relates to the way maybe the agent and generative AI can handle different types of dates and terms and things like that in terms of reporting and trying to give a consolidated view. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the benefits, like you talked, or Maria talked about, that like the things you want to pull out of a contract are not really out of the box, doesn't really get you that far. But one of the things I've seen is beyond just trying to extract like, when a contract expires, the reality is that the world is kind of messy and there's all different ways a contract could end. And I guess a best practice I've seen is people, instead of shying away from that complexity, instead of saying like it's a date and it has to be a date, which is nice for reporting, but misses, that messy tail of things that don't have an explicit date, is having maybe have that, but have additional attributes that either give you a summary of it or even categorize it to say like, there was 42 contracts that had an exact expiration date, and then there was 400 that were set to auto renew automatically, and then there was 14 that had no explicit mention of like the contract ending. So I don't know if that answers the question, but basically that's a case where I would leverage the flexibility of the AI, and also the ease of use. Like you don't have to like train a model anymore if you want to track additional stuff. You just use the tooling in app and can get whatever you want.
Super helpful. Thanks, James. Lucy, I'm gonna kind of cast this one to you. The question was, we've been cautious about using AI for anything higher stakes like redlining or risk review. How do you recommend teams start building confidence in AI recommendations and things along those lines?
Sure. It is testing and living in it. That is the only way to build confidence. You can't require people to use it. You can't, demand that there's an uptick in use without demonstrating the value and demonstrating the output. So curiosity is fantastic. The fact that there is curiosity, I would say lean in on that and make sure that there is a way to kind of demonstrate support from leadership as well, that it's trial and error. It's okay if the outputs aren't perfect, as long as you're obviously able to jump in and fix them with your human intelligence. The confidence will only be built over time. There's no other way really around that. So with every time that the output isn't ideal, you're going to have to take some steps to work it, try it again until you build the confidence in it. It just takes the time and the commitment and a little patience.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen also as a good way for customers to get comfortable is looking at those contract types, which are maybe a little bit lower risk as well. For many companies, NDAs are super high volume and not necessarily a ton of risk. And maybe a good contract type to start with before you get out to your MSAs and SOWs. Yeah, like anything, it takes a little bit of iteration. It's just like you wouldn't hire a paralegal and put them to work on day one with no guidance, right? There's definitely a little bit of input that goes with that. And I think this last question, and then we'll get to wrap up here. Related to data extraction, I think we talked a little bit about this in the demo, but maybe just Michael, what are you seeing in terms of how much output or how much input is really needed to get meaningful output from Sage data extraction?
Yeah, one of the benefits that we've been trying to do, and kind of the example we gave was, you really just have to give it a name and description, or give it a prompt question. Like really, it's simple as giving one example, and we're able to then read it and run with it. Really, to improve those prompts, we do have a tool inside the system that you can give additional examples, and we will write it for you to update that description. But really, at the end of the day, in the past with machine learning, it was 20 different examples, and now just a simple prompt.
Perfect. Well, I want to be conscious of everyone's time. So quickly, thank you again to our participants. Lucy, really appreciate your input, time, insight. James, Michael, Maria, really appreciate your insight and kind of walking us through this, and then showing us some of that technology in action. But maybe most importantly here, thank you to all of you who spent an hour with us today. Really appreciate it. And if there are any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. And hope everyone has a great day. And thank you so much for being here.